this meeting will be more about what you can look forward to for Module 7 and a little bit of feedback for Module 6. So let's go ahead and jump into the feedback for Module 6. And Nancy, as usual, since you're here, I just need you to send me an email when we're done reminding me that you were here and claiming your extra credit. And for anyone else watching this video at a later date, assuming anybody does, you can also get extra credit by sending me an email. But I'm going to, again, list some attendance words, and you'll have to send a list of those attendance words to prove that you were paying attention. And the first word for attendance is going to be Google. So that being said, let me share my screen and we can have a look here. While I'm pulling this up, I will also mention some just generic feedback. So now that everyone's done with exam 3, it is now too late to do exam 2, to redo exam 2. So that being said, if you did redo exam 2 and you haven't emailed me yet to let me know that you want me to adjust your grade, then you need to do that. And also, now that exam 2 is completely behind us, forever behind us, you can now meet me online and we can go over your exam 2 and talk about the questions you missed. So you can have the correct answers to help you study for the final. So again, you'll get a 5% boost to your grade for doing that. As far as exam 6 is concerned, exam 3 that you just finished, I haven't had a chance to look at it, but I can probably almost definitely, unless everybody did very well, that I probably am going to reopen it again. So much like exam 2, I will probably allow you to retake exam 3, and it'll be just like it was last time. So watch the other videos or let me know if you have questions about that. But anyway, let's move forward. Unless you had questions about the exam stuff I just talked about.
No, thank you though.
Obviously, just keep an eye on your announcements, which was right here. Technically, when I send out announcements, you should get emails, but just in case, you should always go in and check the announcement section at least once a day and make sure there's nothing new, because if I decide to let you guys retake it, that's where I will announce it. Let's see. Module 6 quiz. Yeah, I guess we could look at this very quickly. Okay. So for the discussion, if I'm going to be really honest, I start the semester really, really picky about, everything, following the prompt and, using sources. And as the semester goes on, I get less and less picky. And the reason for that is, it's just, I really don't have the time to read everybody's papers that closely and check them all for plagiarism and check every single link. It's really just not feasible. So this is why I start off so picky, because you guys get into that habit. And now I can just, after that, just kind of take it a lot easier. And take it a lot easier I did for the most part. I'm just scanning over what you've written. And if it looks like I'm just looking for those keywords like storing rainwater and laws and environment, and looking to make sure you use sources. And generally speaking, if you met all those criteria, I just gave you full credit. Now, granted, there are still some replies, some other things, like I said, that I still need to grade. And the people who have already turned stuff in, like before the weekend, like I said, that's exactly how I graded. It was really quick, really simple. I didn't look into it that closely. But anybody who turned in anything over the weekend, I probably will put theirs a little bit under a little bit more scrutiny. Just kind of like as a reward for the people who did things early, not necessarily a punishment for the people who did things over the weekend, but a reward for my early birds. So yeah, that's it. Again, now if you, Nancy, or anybody watching this, if you specifically if you want to look at your discussion and talk about it, then we can meet online and do that. And as usual, you get your 5% boost. But as usual, what I have looked at so far, that's the normal mistakes. I see people making replies without using references. Or in like one case, I just graded one not too long ago, a few minutes ago, that did use a reference but didn't do it properly. So I'll remind you can't just put a link at the bottom of your post. You need to make it obvious how you use your source. And in case you're wondering, I'll say it again. One of the reasons I do that is because students before you have just notoriously, they've just written something and they knew they needed a source. So they just threw some link down that really didn't pertain that much to what their source, what they wrote. So yeah, that's the only thing feedback I have for the module 6 discussion that you guys just completed. Do you have any questions, Nancy?
No.
All right, nice and easy. The lab, this is pretty straightforward. Actually, it's not straightforward. This is a little bit slightly different. I just wanted, this is the mistakes I'm seeing so far. And this is important. So, well, this might not pertain to you, Nancy, but for anybody, I don't remember if it does or not, but anybody watching, this is important. Pay attention. Some people, you had option 1 or option 2. Option 1 is you just watch this one long video. Option 2 is you need to watch 2 videos, right? So you need to watch one from this section and one from this section. And one of the mistakes I'm seeing is people who chose option 2, they only watched one video. So the point here is, if that was you, then you need to go back in and do another one of these videos so you can get the rest of your points. Another mistake I'm seeing, or I saw at least once, is somebody didn't tell me which video they watched. So for now, they have a 0, but all you need to do is fill that out, tell me which video you watched, and reload it. And then the last thing I'll say about it is, because these are videos, you can't really go back and redo the questions, right? So you either got full credit or you didn't. So if you didn't get full credit, but you want more points, then just watch another one of these videos that you haven't watched and email me after you're done and say, hey, can you please apply those extra credit points to lab 6? So I would do that for you. If you didn't get full credit and you want full credit, watch more videos, and then those points will be applied to your grade for lab 6. And any leftover points will just go to your semester total. Any questions about that?
No.
All right. We are moving right along then. All right. So, and then of course, like I said, the exam, I've already talked about that. Quiz, that's usual stuff. If you're not one of those people who's retaking the quiz until you get 100%, I recommend doing that if your time allows. So let's move on to what's upcoming. Let's look at module 7 very quickly. Discussion, same stuff. Please use your sources, use them properly. If I remember correctly, Nancy's already started this. This is really straightforward. You're going to pick an energy source, that is presented in chapter 14 or 15. It could be renewable or non-renewable. And, like for example, if you do solar, that would be renewable. If you do coal, that would be non-renewable, right? So choose an energy source. List all the advantages and disadvantages that your textbook lists, and then find another source and include some other advantages and disadvantages. That's pretty straightforward. That's it. Just make sure if you use more than one source, especially if you use more than one source, make sure it's obvious how you used, which information came from which source. What else to say about this? I'm trying to think about the mistakes I normally do. Yes.
Okay, so when you say using one source on that, wouldn't we end up using 2? Because precisely getting them out of the book, you would have to cite the book too. That's what I done. And then when my other sources or my other disadvantage and advantage that I found, through research, I also added that source.
Perfect. Yeah. And in a perfect world, you would also, like you said, list your textbook, but as picky as I am, even with sources, even I'm not that picky. So because the directions told you to use your textbook, you don't have to list it. Now, granted, you would, when you write it, you should say, like for anybody watching this, they should say, according to the textbook, here's the advantages and here's the disadvantages. So that's the biggest mistakes I saw, or the biggest thing to make sure you do. Like, make it very obvious which information came from your textbook and which came from your sources. All right. And then, for the responses, pick 2 classmates, at least 2. I'll remind you again, you can do more than 2 replies to help buffer your score to make sure you get that full credit, and argue against or for them. Obviously, you're going to provide references. So your arguments can include an additional reference that supports their argument. It can include a reference that indicates their argument is incorrect, right? So I'll give examples here in a second. Or it can be a counterpoint to their argument. So here's some examples. one student might claim in their original post that a disadvantage of wind power is that the average wind turbine reaches about 60 decibels of sound, right? Another student could offer a counterpoint, noting that the average home air conditioner unit is about 50 decibels, right? So that would not, not necessarily be an argument for or against, but it is like it's a counterpoint, adding some context, right? So, okay, the average turbine is that loud. Well, here's how much your average air conditioning unit is, right? So you could provide context by doing that. Of course, use sources. Another thing you could do, or another student could provide a reference that argues that the decimal level is actually 43, not 60, right? So again, student A makes some claim, student B using a different source, so like, well, not according to this source, right? That would be an argument. And then, of course, on this third example, a third student could agree with the original post, right? So again, the original student says, hey, this is how loud they are. And another student could come back and be, hey, I agree. And according to this other source, they agree too, right? You're right. It is this loud. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right. So again, you're just basically, these replies really are, for the most part, all about, so, I mean, you always have to use sources, but this particular discussion is very into sources because, again, you're either refuting what they say with a different source or, again, agreeing with what they say using a different source. So that's pretty much it. I'm going to look through this really quickly and make sure I'm not forgetting anything, see if it jogs my memory. Yeah, another common mistake is someone might say, hey, I'm writing mine about coal, but then they failed to say it was non-renewable, right? So you'll lose a point for that. You'll lose a point if you don't list all the advantages and disadvantages from the textbook. You'll obviously lose points if you don't add to that list. Yeah, pretty straightforward. So that's it. Let's move on to Lab 7 if you don't have any questions. All right, here. Oh, where'd it go? Okay, so there's two different labs of the same thing. One lab is for non-renewable sources and the other one's renewable. So let's just look at it really quickly. I'll show you what it looks like, talk about some common mistakes. This is very straightforward. So for the non-renewable lab, this is renewable. We're looking at geothermal energy, conventional hydropower, solar energy, waste biomass, wind, and wood biomass, right? So you've read about them. You should be familiar with them from the exam, from the textbook. So then your hypothesis questions are going to be to answer this question. Basically, do you think these things are, over the past 3 years, do you think that particular energy has increased, decreased, or stayed the same? That's it. And that's it literally for your hypothesis. You could put that. You don't even need to do a sentence. I want to make things easier for you this week. You just same, increase, decrease. That will suffice. But just to point some things out, again, you're going to do that for each one of these renewable energy sources. But also I want to point out not just each individual, but for example, this first question asks all renewable energy, right? So do you think all of them combined, do you think they've seen an increase, decrease, or remain the same? And then some other things to point out to make sure you understand. Which one do you believe has seen the largest increase, right? So of all those listed, which one do you think saw the biggest increase? And then again here, which one of all of them, which one do you think saw the largest decrease? And here's where I want to talk. I'm going to make sure you understand this. Then this question is saying overall, overall, do you think over the past 3 years, which has had a larger increase, renewable or non-renewable, right? It's pretty straightforward. Which one had a larger increase that you think? And here's where it gets a little bit more complicated. I want to make sure you understand this. In the last year, which one was used the most, renewable or non-renewable? I want it to be very clear that that's different than this question. You could, something could see an increase, but that doesn't mean it's being used the most, right? You could almost think it like talking about somebody's weight. Like you have two people. One of them weighs 300 pounds and the other one weighs 100 pounds. The 300-pound person, believe it or not, lost 5 pounds. The 100-pound person, believe it or not, had gained 20 pounds. So if I were to ask which one saw the biggest increase, it would be that smaller 100-pound person, right? They're the only ones that saw an increase. But if I were to ask you which one is larger, you would say they're the person that weighs 300 pounds. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Okay, good. So again, it's all about I'm not no longer asking once you get to this portion, once you get to question 11, it's no longer asking about increase or decrease. It's like which one was used the most. And then this one, which of all the renewable energies, which one was used the most? Again, not increased the most, but used the most. And then again here, of all the renewable energy sources that we talked about, which one was used the least? And again, not decreased, but used the least. So if anybody has problems, as always, I always say, just let me know. I can help you with any of the labs. Anyway, once you've formulated your hypotheses, then you're going to test your hypotheses as usual. You can read all this if you want to. It's pretty straightforward. You can also watch this little video where I show you how to fill out the table, but it is really straightforward. You click on this lab. It's going to bring you to this website. And this is the data you need, right? So in this particular conversation you and I are having, we're talking about the renewable lab. So it would be obviously a little bit different if it was non-renewable, but this is what you need for the renewable lab. Hydro, wind, solar, geothermal, waste, and wood, right? Those are the ones. And you can see here how much they've been used, right? So hydropower was used, 250.39 in 2021, right? So you would go here. Whoops. You would go here. You would put third most recent year. So in that case, 2021. And then what I say hydropower was, you would say here that was 250.39, right? So you would put 250.39, right? And that's it. You do that for that year, this year, and this year. And then you would, once you have that data, right? These 3 years, this is the data that you would get from the website where it says enter observation, right? This is all from the website I just showed you. Then you're going to calculate the difference right here, right? It's a nice, simple calculation, but if you don't know how to do it, here it shows you right here. I give you some examples on how to do it. Into the calculation. And then once you know how much it's changed, then you can figure out, what the percent change is. And again, if you need my help, I can show you, but also right here on these little comments, it shows you how to calculate all these things. And I'll tell you this, like I've said before, I don't have time to pull out a calculator to grade everybody's work. So I just use what I call lookology. I'm just looking at these numbers. And if it's like, for example, if you had a very small change and you say something like, it was a 200% increase, then I'm pulling out the calculator. If it's big enough for me to notice it's wrong without using a calculator, then that's, a bad sign for you. So just be aware of that. Use common sense, look at your numbers. They should make sense to you. Again, if it's a very small change, but you have a big number, something's up, right? Or vice versa. Also a huge thing, and I usually see this, if something goes down, right? So using this example too, we started at 90 and ended up going down to 85, which is a change of -5, right? The biggest mistake I see in this lab is people forget to put their negative signs and the difference and or in the percentage part. So make sure you do that. Any questions about that?
No.
All right. So the renewable total, I want to make sure this is clear too. This is information just like above. This information, if I remember correctly, is in the website. Let me double check. You know what? It's not, is it? So the I'm glad we had this conversation. The renewable total. Oh yeah, it is. So here's the renewable total, right? This, and this. That's the total. This is the information you're going to put in the website, or excuse me, in the table for renewable total. You don't need to add up, right? You don't have to add this up to get the renewable total. It's right there. Here's what gets a little bit tricky. I just want to make sure you understand. To figure out the non-renewable total, the website doesn't give you that, right? It doesn't, like, if you look under here, there's not like a non-renewable tab, right? There's a renewable tab that has a little bit of stuff under it, but then there's all this other stuff. So what we can do though is take the total, which is right here, right? That's the total for 2021, total for 2022, so on and so forth. You take that, and hopefully this makes sense. This should be common sense. If this is the total of renewable and non-renewable, then all we have to do is subtract the renewable and whatever's left is non-renewable. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so again, this is the number you're going to start with. You'll take this and you'll subtract this, right? So you'll subtract the renewable total. And again, if you forget to do that, right here in the comments, it says it right here, right? It gives you examples on how to do it. So again, it's the if we're trying to get the non-renewable total, that means we take the total minus the renewable, and we're just left with non-renewable. So that's how that works. That's usually the biggest mistakes I see. But anyway, after you fill out the table, now you have your data. So now you can reflect back and see if your hypothesis was correct or not. Hopefully you guys are seeing the pattern. It's all the same from almost all these labs. So once again, it's asking you to restate your hypothesis. Once again, I know that's a pain, but this is all on purpose because I want to make sure you actually are reflecting back on your hypothesis. So restate your hypothesis and then say if it was correct or incorrect, and then say, answer the question. Did the consumption of renewable energy in the U.S. increase, decrease, or remain the same? So I know it's repetitive. I apologize, but it really is just making you, it's a scientific process, right? You formed your hypothesis, you collected your data, but now you're going to explain whether your hypothesis was correct or incorrect. One of the common mistakes I see, well, first of all, is that they don't do, these are 3-part questions like I just talked about. So make sure you do all 3 parts. That's one of the most common mistakes. Another common mistake is the wording of this question. It says, what was your hypothesis and was it correct or incorrect? So one of the mistakes I see is people will say, my hypothesis, they'll just say yes or no, but that doesn't mean anything by itself, right? Yes, what? Yes, it was correct. Yes, it was incorrect, right? Be specific. You have to tell me if it was correct or incorrect. It's a very common mistake I see. And that's it, right? You'll, again, answer those questions. Tell me if your hypotheses were correct or not. Then just a few reflection questions. Why do you think that the renewable energy source saw the largest increase, saw such an increase? So whatever it is, just think about it. You can guess or you can look it up and make sure you let me know which one you did. But it needs to be something unique, right? So let's say, for example, wind energy saw the biggest increase. You don't want to say something like, well, the wind energy probably saw the biggest increase because it's renewable and it doesn't, I don't know, something like that, right? But if you were to say it's renewable, well, they all are, right? So when you're guessing or when you look it up, whatever it is, it needs to be specific to that energy source. Same thing here. So you're going to, again, talk about why do you think the one that saw the biggest increase? Why? The one that saw the biggest decrease? Why? And again, you can guess or look it up, but you just have to make sure you tell me which one. That's a big mistake I see. Another big mistake I see, is despite having all this data, people still screw it up. And like, let's say again, for the same mistake, let's say wind energy saw the biggest increase, but they just screw up and they might say, oh no, waste biomass saw the biggest increase. Like, just make sure you're looking at your data. And that's the most basic stuff to do. And that's, again, one of the bigger mistakes I see. The data says one thing and then they write something else. So yeah, make sure you're paying attention to your data. And then finally, again, some reflection questions. If the overall consumption of renewable energy has increased, do you think it was because Americans are using more energy altogether? Or do you think specifically it's a shift towards, renewable energy over non-renewable, or both, or whatever? Just give me your opinion on that. All right. You don't need to look anything up. Just give me your opinion. And then again, just some questions like scientific questions. Why do you think you were required to analyze multiple years, right? Why not just 1 year? So just things to think about. Then finally, you're going to need to do another graph. I know I've received feedback from that. I remember one person was just pissed, like, why are there so many graphs? That's just science, right? Science is all about, forming hypotheses, testing hypotheses, and displaying your data, right? So yeah, you have to do it. So you could do a line graph or a bar graph. I'll let you choose. If you do a bar graph, your x-axis category should be the types of power, right? So it should be like, wind, solar, so on and so forth. And the y-axis should be the percent change, right? So your bar graph would be listed on the x-axis, all these things. And on the y-axis, you would have the percent change, right? Not the total difference, but the percent change. That's how you would do the bar graph. If it's a line graph, what you could do instead, for the x-axis, again, you would still have each one of those categories. Excuse me, I'm sorry. If you choose a line graph, each category of renewable energy should have its own line with the years on the x-axis, right? So the last 3 years on the x-axis, and then a line that just shows how much it's increased or decreased. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, good. Pretty simple. But again, let me know if you need help. Make sure you use proper labels. So Lab 7 would not be a good name for your graph. It should be the graph. The title of the graph should describe the data. And that's it. Usual extra credit stuff. Oh yeah, I will point this out too. For extra credit, you could, whoops, let me fix that. Sorry, I'm glad I saw this. You could, oh, there we go. Highlight this and, whoops, you didn't really like that. Anyway, I don't know if you guys know how to do it, but you could highlight this and then right click and insert column left as many times as you want and keep going back more than 3 years, right? But if you do that, when you do the difference, remember it's your oldest year and the most recent year are the years you're looking at, not the in-between years. Any questions about that?
No.
All right. Well, that's pretty much it. Again, another thing I'll mention is there's 2 different versions of this lab that they're basically the same thing, except one's looking at renewable sources, the other one's looking at non-renewable sources. Just like module 6, if you want to, you can do both versions. So if you didn't get full credit for one of your versions, you can add that extra credit from the other version towards your score. And the rest of it, again, will be applied to your semester total. So I think that's all I have. Did you have anything? Do you think there's something else I need to touch on?
I have a question, but it's kind of skipping on to the next week.
That's okay. Let's do it.
The exam for next week is our final, right?
Correct.
Okay. Is that going to be like more than 50 questions? I'm sure.
Yes. It'll be.
Okay. Is there any way we could get a study guide this week to start studying for it, or possibly?
Yes and no. So the study guide is going to go as usual, because I don't like teaching you guys to take exams. I want to teach you the subjects. In case you're wondering why I don't just give you the study guides to begin with. So you'll get the study guide as usual next Monday, but good question. Like you asked, there's going to be about 100 questions. About 50 of them are going to be the new material covered in module 8. Module 7 and module 8. And then the other 50 questions are going to come directly verbatim from the first 3 exams. So that's your study guide for half the exam is your first. Yeah. Which is why I keep saying to people, it would really help you to meet me online. So I can give you all the correct answers to the old exams. And so you can, you get that boost. So it's a double whammy. You get your 5% boost and you get all the correct answers. So it'll help you study for the final. So great question. Any other questions?
Thank you. That's it.
You're welcome. All right. Oh man, I didn't do attendance words, did I? I didn't do many. All right. Well, the last word for attendance, which I guess is the second word. And usually I don't like to tell you how many attendance words there are, but somebody going through this might reach the end of wait a minute, I don't remember any attendance words. So this time I will tell you, I think this is only the second attendance word that I've done. Anyway, the last word for attendance is kneecap. And then also I want you to, not you, Nancy, but anybody watching the video, in addition to your 2 words to prove that you watch it, also ask one question about the material that I presented in this discussion. So that's all I have. I'm going to stop recording. Remind you, come to me if